Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. All right, well, hello and welcome, everybody. This is your host, 𝐒𝐚𝐬𝐿, and today you're listening to the Constant Sports Podcast, and we have a great guest joining us today, all the way from over on the East Coast today, Alex Kopilow. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And this is for the listeners and viewers, a little background on Alex. He's done a lot of work in kind of the digital social media sales, sponsored content in the sports industry. He's had various roles within sports and without sports. So he's got I guess, a good idea of kind of how it works, whether it's with a news station, the company Golin, Rise Interactive, then obviously with Madison Square Garden Sports Group, the Arena Group, the Chicago White Sox. So he's got a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we're going to kind of pick his brain today and learn a little bit more about this side of the industry that we haven't touched on too much on the podcast. So, Alex, if you don't mind, we'll just kind of jump in here and start with. So you've had a number of jobs, whether it's in the sports industry, I guess attached to the sports industry, you could say. What's the difference that you've seen, between the two, I guess, industries?
Yeah, I think it's all actually pretty much the same.
Yep.
It's whether or not you're in sports. I mean, I've worked primarily in digital marketing, whether it's organic social content, creator marketing, paid social, partnerships. Nothing really changes in the approach when you're talking about content and digital. It's really all about when you're using digital channels, how are you matching the expectations of the audience when they hit the follow button with content that serves them. That is the kind of North Star of having success with content. And whether you're on the brand side, like brands I've worked with, like McDonald's, or I've worked with Walmart, or the Big Ten Conference, or Ulta Beauty, doesn't matter who you are, if you're in sports or not, it's all about really aligning what you're trying to do with content to the expectations of the audience when they hit that follow or subscribe button.
Right. And then you mentioned kind of some of your, I guess, previous clients, brands that you've helped with. Is this a career that when you first started out, you graduated from Ohio State, I believe? So
Yes.
when you first, were an official alumni, a Buckeye there, were you like, okay, this is where I want to be, kind of the digital content space, sponsorship space? Kind of how'd you get into that?
No, it's not what I wanted to do. I went to school for journalism. I wanted to be a sports anchor. I grew up watching SportsCenter in its heyday before you could get all your highlights and scores on your phone. So like in my routine, it was always right before I went to school. Like I would sit down with my dad and watch SportsCenter Top 10 right before going. And I was also that kid that was watching the 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. broadcasts on repeat, even though I had just seen them. So being a sports anchor was always something I wanted to do. And I did do that. I did it for 6 years out of school as a local sports anchor in local markets throughout the country. I wrapped up doing that in 2017. For me, it was just getting back to a big city. I'm from New York originally, from Long Island. So I wanted to get back to a big city, wanted my nights, weekends, and holidays back, and wanted to make a little bit better pay to start to enjoy life more around my family and my friends. So I transitioned into public relations at first. I interned at 27 years old at Weber Shandwick because everybody says journalists can go into PR. And luckily for me, Weber Shandwick saw like, oh, I have a background in sports. And I ended up on the Big Ten Conference client, helping with their organic social strategy and the content that they were pumping out from their social channels. And I had another client as well where we worked in creator marketing and helping understand our content calendar with a network of creators. So that was my introduction into digital marketing. And then over the next 4 years, I worked in a series of agencies where I really got to hone in digital from all different sides, whether it's creator, paid media, or just overall digital strategy. So I kind of fell into it, and it wasn't something I planned on.
Right. Yeah, no, and I feel like that's somewhat of a kind of similar path from the previous, guests I've had on the podcast is they didn't really foresee themselves in the spot that they're in. They just kind of kept working different jobs and figuring out what they like, what they don't like. And then sooner or later, they kind of realized, all right, this is kind of a lane, that I'm interested in. So I feel like that resonates with a lot of the viewers and listeners here, kind of your background there.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I tell, people coming out of school, like, you're going to do this anyway, but not to put too much pressure on yourself to think like whatever my first job out of school is like, that's my life now. My career has changed so many different times. And I started to just, ever since then and making that change, just optimizing for the next move of what works for my life, whether I wanted more time in my personal life or I wanted an opportunity to jump into sports, even if maybe the salary isn't there, or maybe sometimes I needed more financial support. Like whatever I needed at the time, I've kind of tried to optimize for that. So you're not stuck in what you start with.
Right. Yeah. And kind of being, evolving and being, adaptive to different situations. And like you're saying, everyone's kind of got a different, with a background, life story. They're different, like financial needs and whatnot. And there's within sports. And as we touched on in the beginning, sports and not in sports, it's pretty much the same market. You could still not technically work in sports, and have a client like the Big Ten Conference or, a media rights for the team. So it's all pretty relative if when you're first kind of getting in to sports. And one of the things I wanted to touch on as kind of pertains to your time with, is it Golan? Golan?
Yeah, going.
Golan is, so you worked on some McDonald's All-American Game stuff, and Golan isn't, I wouldn't say a sports company, quote unquote. They probably, obviously have clients within sports, but it's probably not a company that people, when they first are trying to go into sports, like, or maybe I'm wrong, but they're like, okay, these guys are deep into sports. But talk to us with how that kind of relationship works with the McDonald's All-American Game, what it was like, working on that project and some of the things you did there.
Yeah, it was really cool. Great opportunity. And one of the things that brought me over to Golan was the fact that not only would I get to work on digital strategy with McDonald's and a huge national, international brand, but also the opportunity to essentially be like the social media manager for the McDonald's All American
Yeah.
Games. So, really getting to get into sports by way of an agency where I was helping build out content calendars, advising on what we wanted to post throughout the year because it's a one-time event in March.
Yep.
And how do you keep the audience engaged? How do you sell tickets through content and building up those strategies? So I was able to use my fandom and seeing what I see out kind of in the digital space and start to bring those ideas into that. We even got to launch McDonald's first TikTok account by way of McDonald's All American Games. Like McDonald's didn't have a TikTok account at the time. We had to pitch why it needed to happen for the All American Games, and that was in December of 2019. We were pitching why TikTok matters, why they needed to be there. We did our first test over there. It had mixed results, but they have a TikTok account now. They kind of got to test the waters and then saw the popularity, and they have a TikTok account now. So that was really cool. Loved doing that. The only downside was as my first All American Games was coming, so was COVID.
Yep.
And the event got canceled 2 weeks before my first All American Games. But always a really cool climb. Like working in agencies, you can very much work in sports without directly working for a team or a league.
Yeah, no, and that's something I wanted to hone on a little bit, is kind of your pitch to McDonald's, right? Massive company, and kind of like, hey, this with kind of regarding a sports property, and what was that pitch like? It was a power deck, slide deck, kind of, walk the listeners and viewers through that. Maybe some of your preparation.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely Dex, but I think the biggest thing was, and this is to McDonald's credit, they really wanted to understand why this works and what is the insight first. Like, don't just pitch tactics. Tactics are great. It's everybody's favorite part to come up with the creative ideas, but why are we doing it and what's the insight into why we're doing it? So if we're pitching any ideas, it's got to be data backed, or there needs to be an understanding of like why the audience would want it. Are we using social listening and seeing comments asking for something? And that works for them on the greater brand side as well.
Yeah.
Is there something from social listening and insight we can pull away? Is there something from past performance of results that we can pull? And then also there's sometimes where they let us take some chances. I mean, I remember we were posting one of the biggest moments of the McDonald's All American Games outside of the actual event is announcing the team.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, we were pitching, I think, a 48-second video to reveal all the people who got it, but putting a single name each time to roll out the team. So you had to have that anticipation and see your name come out instead of kind of posting a graphic with all the names.
Yeah.
At the time, best practice was shorter is better on video. and we certainly got a lot of pushback from the client, but we made our case in why it would make sense. They let us do it, and it was our top performing video, not only that year, but year over year, even in a non-COVID season. So yes, it needed to be data backed, but they also did a good job of, when we made a strong case, allowing us to test as well.
Yeah, very cool. And regarding kind of the data and the analytics, how much of a role does that play in selling assets, selling content kind of ideas? Like you're saying, you mentioned kind of the tactic is the cool, the sexy part, you could say, but the data is something that plays a big role, or does it play a big role kind of when you're selling these assets and content?
Yeah, it's everything. I think if you're working in digital and social, whatever, you have to understand the analytics behind how you define success, what makes it work. People want to see the numbers, right? Because they might not agree that an idea is good. You might think an idea is good, but if you can just show them the data, it's like, well, you don't have to believe me. It's a third party essentially saying this works, and you don't have to take my word for it. So I think that's the kind of the great equalizer in saying what you should and shouldn't do, but everybody should definitely understand the analytics of content.
Yeah. And then what are some of the, I guess, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 kind of hot analytics hot topic analytics, impressions, views. I guess it probably depends on the platform, but what are some of the main ones?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's always going to want impressions.
Hmm.
Everyone's always going to want engagements, but I think the key is getting away from total impressions, total engagements, and really honing in on something that's going to help you tell a story, right? You should be comparing on more of a per post basis. How does it compare against your impressions or engagements per post, or year over year on a per post basis? Like really trying to understand that. Audience retention. So if there's a lot of video content that's being pumped out, how long is the audience sticking around? Are you looking at shares and saves? So how much has your content said, oh, I'm going to go share this with someone else, or I'm going to save this and watch it for later? Like really starting to dig into things like that, going a little bit deeper to understand the quality of the content. Of course, look, impressions are going to be great, but if there's no context around like a number, then what does it actually mean? So doing a better job of comparing against benchmarks to understand the impact of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And like you're touching on, the impressions obviously is going to be the first thing people see and want to see. But as you mentioned, kind of digging deeper, and this goes kind of with anything really, digging deeper and showing kind of more of the why behind high impressions or low impressions, things like that.
Yeah.
As an expert in the space, with your time with Madison Square Garden Sports Corp there, you kind of really, dug deep into the, team properties and assets, rights with Madison Square Garden Sports Corporation over there. So what was it about, how did you become the in-house quote unquote expert in that space? Just research, memorizing a lot of things, studying. How'd you kind of get to that?
Yeah, so kind of the most recent phase of my career after my time in agencies has been in digital partnerships with the White Sox, and then with MSG, kind of leading digital partnerships for the Knicks and the Rangers, and then eventually helping out with their other entities like the Rockettes. But for me, they were looking for someone. They'd always had a partnership solutions team. They do a lot of great work with huge brands, and they were looking for someone specifically focused on digital. They wanted someone who understood the algorithms, understood the platforms, could help make sure that assets for partners actually performed, but also kind of protecting the content teams as well, and making sure whatever we're selling in is things that are actually going to resonate with their audience. So a lot of that role is education for both internal staff and for clients, and helping them understand what and why something works on digital, building up inventory of ideas and concepts that can go and be sold that the teams actually want to do, and then valuations of what they're worth, and putting those together, but making sure all those assets align with client goals. So for me, I mean, I think they brought me on is because I had that blend of partnerships experience and knowledge of the digital space, having kind of come from the content side and then into the partnership side. And I've been able to meld those two things together.
Yeah, no, beautiful. And it kind of goes to show that maybe where you start in your career can still pay dividends with kind of I guess later on with the jobs. And like you said, melting them together. And now as you're with the arena group. What's kind of your day-to-day there? What are you working on over there? Some projects, things like that.
Yeah, so the Arena Group, I've dived into the sales side of sponsorship. So selling sponsored content across their entities, used to be Sports Illustrated, but also Men's Journal, The Street, Parade, and we've got a lot of lifestyle sports as well. Surfer, Powder, and really getting into those action and lifestyle sports. So it's using those social and digital channels, whether it's web or social, what have you, and really helping brands align with content there and helping them achieve their business goals, whether it's top of funnel and awareness or getting involved with an engaged community, or then even retargeting off of that and helping kind of drive business with paid media as well. So offering a large media mix of an audience, as well as opportunity with great content so they can kind of capture the intention of our engaged audiences across properties.
Got it. And then is that a lot of, kind of salesy stuff, cold calls, cold emails? I'm sure, past relationships and business kind of relationships and previous jobs will probably play a role, but what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, it's definitely like cold outreach, a lot of it, some personal relationships, but I would say, where I've had the most success is in the research side of it, really trying to understand if there's a certain sport or a certain kind of lifestyle entity, like what can I see what brands have been doing in this space already, and going and reaching out to them and saying, hey, you're really focused on women's empowerment out in the sports industry. We have something that's similar. So really doing the background research on what brands are already doing, helping them align with that, or taking the other side and seeing brands that are involved with kind of certain assets and going out to their competitors and saying, your competitors out in this space, here's how we can help you kind of gain market share as well. So it's kind of a mix of things, but definitely heavily investing in the research side.
Yeah, for sure. And then as you've kind of transitioned, you could say, into this kind of the sales part of this, where have you seen the most, I guess, where do you see the most growth in the industry, whether that's, different companies getting involved and maybe some companies that have been involved kind of dropping out or things like that?
I think just overall, whether it's sports or lifestyle, it's everybody knows that social media captures attention.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to kind of be digital first, but it's helping them understand the way where you need to capture the attention first, and you can't necessarily drive the sales right away. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but first, let's capture the attention with great content, get people to understand that you're there, make that association, and then use other tactics to kind of help your business goals. But I think the biggest trend is people continue to invest in the social and digital side. That's where, you're meeting people where you are,
Hmm.
and everybody's starting to see more success because we're really still in its infancy, right? Like it's
Right.
been around for, it's 2024, so 15 years, social media, 15, 20 years. So it's still just growing. Everybody's knowledge is growing, and they're continuing to invest in that. And they want digital to be a part of their overall partnership.
No, and for sure, like you said, it is kind of crazy to think about how content, social media industry is 15, 20 years old, where before that it was just kind of just ticket sales and, kind of I guess, archaic ways of going about, putting in newspapers and things like that, just the best you could do. But are there certain apps? I mean, I know we talked about like McDonald's kind of creating a TikTok for the first time, having their account. Are there certain apps that are better than others, like a Twitter, Facebook? I mean, do people still use Facebook, sports teams and things like that?
Yeah. One, Facebook, I think, is incredibly underrated at this point. I
Okay.
think the hate has gone almost too far. You still, especially in sports, can drive tremendous results on that platform. I mean, they benefit from the fact that, back when Facebook started, when you named your interests, people typically would
Mhm.
put their sports fandom in there, and then those interests turned into pages that you were automatically following. So they have huge followings on Facebook built in.
Wow.
Harder to grow on that channel. You still can, but they've had these huge audiences, and you can still tap into that. Some of the best content that we've ever had, especially sponsored content, came on Facebook. Like I remember in the 2021 playoffs for the Chicago White Sox, like some of our best content performance came on Facebook. And while it might not have been built with Facebook at the forefront, it still works. But I think if you had to rank the social channels when we're talking for sponsorship, Instagram is still number one. I would say it generates about 10 times the engagement of any other social channel except for TikTok, but it's still the leader in engagement. And that's where a lot of people are. It still hits a young audience, and there's so many different capabilities between reels, carousels, the collab tools, stories. There's just a ton of options in the way things can come to life there. I would say that's the front row seats of the kind of social media landscape. TikTok is, heavily popular. I think we all know that, especially helpful in the creator space. I think people, if they're trying to dive into creator marketing, Instagram and TikTok, that's where it's really going to come to life. But that's number two. And then I would say, look, YouTube needs to be tapped into more. Everybody's there. Every generation is there. It's a huge search engine. Like, people need to be there more. That's not where a lot of sponsored content is sold, but I think that can be leveraged better. And then, of course, you're going to see a ton on Twitter, just by way of sports being a real-time event, and there's no better place to be than on Twitter for something like that.
Yeah, no, and I think I don't know if it surprised me, but YouTube kind of does seem like the longest form content where a lot of teams I feel like are starting to kind of do their own shows and I guess previews and things like that, which is smart for the fans to then kind of get a behind the scenes look, because I feel like there's Hard Knocks has its thing, Amazon Prime used to have kind of its own thing, and then a lot of the teams were like, well, we can just do this ourselves, which I think was kind of smart because then a lot of them have their a sponsor bottom right next to the name, so it's that's helpful, I think, as they continue to grow their I guess media assets.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge opportunity, but to be fair, it takes the most work.
Oh,
It is the hardest to produce that kind of content. It's a lot of custom stuff, custom sets, and you need
mm,
access, and it's really tough. It can be done. There are teams that do it really well. The Los Angeles Chargers are probably at the forefront of some great YouTube content. Their all access show, All In,
mhm.
is one of the best in the business. The franchise with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles do a great job. A ton of teams do some great work on YouTube, but I definitely think there is so much more to be had beyond highlight reels, player highlight reels, and press conferences that can be done to really maximize that channel.
Yeah, no, and that'll be interesting to watch as we continue to grow within the sports social game. And there's one thing I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, and as this is actually one of the reasons I came across your LinkedIn was your SponCon Sports, the newsletter and kind of things and the content you're generating over there. So just give us kind of a deep dive on what that is, how you came up with it, and what it's all about.
Yeah, SpunCon Sports is a newsletter devoted to sponsored content strategy in the sports industry. Kind of came to be, it's something I'm just super passionate about, and I was posting a lot about sponsored content. In 2023, something I had set out to do to post at least 3 times on LinkedIn. And then sadly was laid off from MSG in September of 2023, had some extra time. And a friend encouraged me to make it a newsletter. He's like, you're doing all the work already of a newsletter. You might as well take it to the next level and turn it into something like that. So, the goal of the newsletter is really to highlight the best in class examples of sponsored content, to celebrate what people are doing in the industry, but also to use the insights that I've learned on the sports side in digital partnerships to help people maximize that opportunity the most. Because the thing is, there aren't a lot of people who focus on digital partnerships within sports. I think I can probably just on my 2 hands, maybe name all the people that I know who have that job function.
Mhm.
It's something that should exist on every single sports team and entity, but it doesn't. So my goal is to just help people understand what they can do, how they can do it better, and just showing best in class examples to help inspire, some great work across the industry.
Yeah, no, very cool. And I've been, I guess, a subscriber now for a few weeks, and I've loved kind of the content as I've just come across it there on LinkedIn. And so, I guess one of my questions is, what has maybe surprised you, or something that you weren't aware of since you've created SponCon Sports? Different, I guess, maybe like I said, maybe something that surprised you just didn't see coming from the industry.
No, I think it's helped me, connect with other people in the industry and just uncover some incredibly smart people who are doing amazing work. I've talked with Sam Bear, who used to work with the Carolina Panthers, and she was one of the first digital partnerships kind of managers within the sports industry and seeing, how they structured things over there. And they are known for a great content team and the strategies they use to kind of help drive revenue and keep great content coming. I've talked with the chief brand officer of Dude Perfect and understanding from a creator standpoint how partnerships works. And I'm seeing the same trends. I don't know that it's surprising, but it's good to hear that it's not just me that thinks like you really need to come up with ideas proactively. You need to build ideas and then push what you want on a partner and help kind of bridge the gap with small customizations. So kind of seeing that like there is a desire to learn and for sponsored content. Not a lot of people have kind of tapped into that. So I think seeing that it's not just a niche topic, that people really are interested in it, I think that is not necessarily a surprise, but good to know that people are really interested.
Yeah, no, and that's it's interesting to kind of learn more and listen a little bit more about that, and especially kind of this space. And one of the things I was interested in from your newsletter was the co-created content. Seems smart to do for both sides, but how have you seen that grown within the industry? Has it, is it on a higher trajectory now, or where do you see that kind of co-created content going?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for background for people, there's kind of three levels of sponsored content. There's associated, integrated, and co-created. Associated is stuff that you're already doing, whether there's a partner involved or not. You'll see a lot of just kind of logos and tagging.
Mhm.
Integrated, you start to see that product integration. And then co-created is kind of that highest level of sponsored content where you really start to see brand messaging coming through. It's the heaviest brand integration you can get. And it's the riskiest because it's the highest odds of getting into that ad-like territory, but it can really pay off. So co-created it's just got to be very thoughtful, and teams have done it really well and teams have done it poorly. But on the side that teams have done it well, I mean, the Golden State Warriors have done a great job this year with Rakuten and Steph Curry. Did a partnership focused on the Black and Fashion Council, where members of the Black and Fashion Council would create outfits that Steph Curry would wear on their player arrival content, which is great. And Rakuten owns the player arrival content. They have a whole branded hallway. So that's kind of the crossover there. So Steph Curry would wear it, to get exposure via Steph's and the team channels. But then those outfits were available to purchase with cash back and at a discount as well on Rakuten. So every single piece of the puzzle was involved, and it was great content all around. It served every part of the audience. So that's kind of that highest level of co-created. I think every brand wants that level.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily make sense for that. Like that should only be about 5% of what you sell in terms of your inventory. But the way you suss out kind of what is fitting of that is one, budget. I mean, one, do you have the budget to afford to be able to do that? But two, objectives and goals, right? If your goal is awareness and reach, that super branded content may not be the best answer, because typically it's a lower frequency. The results might not be there on the front end. But if you're really looking for that heavy brand messaging to tell that deeper story, to make an impact in the community, that might be when you want to focus on something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that example was awesome to see it. I don't follow basketball too much, but I from listening to that and seeing that, I think that's huge. I mean, the fact that, I mean, we can go into like the tactical and the marketing side of it, and then the numbers. Obviously, I would love to see kind of the start to finish numbers, impressions versus how many people stayed through the entire process and then purchased. But I think stuff like that is huge, and it's only going to give teams and other content creators more ideas, right, in the space going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps to have someone like Steph involved
Yep.
with that. Steph has the partnership with Rakuten, but also him being involved, that's certainly going to help reach. And I mean, the Warriors just generally, not only do they do great, sponsored content, great content overall, but they have a huge hot following too. So really tapped into everybody's strengths, even Rakuten, where making those products available and be able to kind of fit what they do and getting that cash back and giving those prices to help kind of gain exposure for the designers. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is making sure the designers are at the forefront.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, all around great project. And I am interested to know if there's been, I guess, some collaborations that maybe didn't go so well, but I don't want to put anyone on blast, but I feel like I saw one recently where there was like a golf company, and they parked the golf cart on the like the greens, and a bunch of people were like, you can't take the golf cart on the greens, like you guys don't know what you're doing here. Have there been other examples where you've seen maybe some co-created content that might have been a bit off or something was misplaced and it just wasn't executed, I guess, as well as it could have been?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna name specific
Yep, yep,
examples only because I don't want to put anyone on blast. But I think like you know it when you see it. It looks and sounds like an ad. The
yep,
performance isn't going to be there, and it happens a lot. I mean, it happens more than I'd like to see. But hey, I mean, sometimes I mean if you're taking a chance, it's one thing. But I mean, I know that there is it happens a lot, and I think that's when there's certain reasons why that happens when it doesn't work. Sometimes it's because things are sold in without a lot of details. That's when that can happen. So if you're selling in TBD custom content that lives on X channels, and that happens a lot,
yeah.
that's when you see a lot of ad like content because then the brand feels that they have more of a say in what is coming to life than they
Mm.
actually should. It's not driven by an insight of what works with the audience. You want to get away from selling TBD content. So that's why it's really on the content team to come up with an inventory and a list of options that then can be sold because those are all built on what is going to work for the audience. And then you can kind of tailor it to the brand. So I think that's incredibly important, but that's what stems into that bad kind of content.
Got it. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was interested in is how does it kind of get to that, because I feel like sometimes we'll see content and people are thinking like how many people had to sign off for that to kind of get to where it was. Like no one thought, maybe this isn't a good idea, bad idea, but I think it kind of goes to what you're saying is if you got, I guess, two or three groups of people saying one thing should look like one, you're going to kind of have, maybe not the best insight on a potential, product you're releasing or
Yeah,
content.
yeah. The biggest difference is like partnership teams are very, especially in sports, are very used to selling signage
Mm,
and kind of in arena assets that are pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of nuance to them. And it is where you can just get a message out, right? You can sell LED boards and things like that. And that's where a message goes. You don't have to really worry about what the audience wants. You can just give out your message, not worrying about as much capturing attention with
yeah.
it. And there's so much more nuance to digital that every single detail needs to be sent through. So everything from what channels it's going to be on, how many posts it's going to be, and like unique instances of posts versus total posts, what the integration is going to be, how it's going to come to life. Like that all needs to be outlined at the pitch. Like
Mm,
if it comes anytime after the pitch,
got it.
then you're running into trouble and you end up posting things that just don't make sense for your audience, which, you know, hurts in two ways. One, it's not going to drive results. And two, your client's going to be disappointed and then blame the social team. So the social team's upset, the client's upset, and now you might
Everyone's
not get a
upset.
renewal. So I always say, like, look, the thought you put in the front end that will lead to renewals. And the quick sale, anyone can make a quick sale, and that'll get you an initial partnership. But like real great thought is going to get you the renewal and make a partnership over time.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the name of the game there is renewal. And obviously, the renewal comes with kind of the built-in trust that each party, each side has, worked out together. And I think, as you're alluding to, kind of putting that upfront work and showing, because obviously that's going to lead to more better results and not a kind of a get, rich quick type of, I guess, plan. It's more of a long term, and then obviously having a client for longer is going to be more beneficial for both people. So yeah, that's a brilliant strategy there as you continue in the space. Um, Alex, thanks for joining on today and sharing your thoughts and experiences within this industry. It's a very intriguing space for me, especially with somebody in sports. Is we all see the content, we all see the signage, the digital adage, but it's refreshing and interesting to see kind of the why behind it, and as you've alluded to today with the different strategies and things like that. So thanks for jumping on today, and we'll kind of give you the floor here. And if you want to shout out, obviously your newsletter when you drop it, where they can find it, social channels, things like that, we'll give you the floor.
Yeah, give me a follow on LinkedIn and definitely subscribe to SponCon Sports. You can just Google it, but it's sponconsports.beehive.com. If you want to go and subscribe there, or you can subscribe on LinkedIn. We drop new newsletters every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. So that's when that comes out. And then I guess I would just shout out a few resources that I use, people who keep me up to date in the industry. I think Leah Haberman's In Case You Missed It newsletter has been huge. Lindsay Gamble on LinkedIn. He has a newsletter as well that really keeps me up to date on digital. And Rachel Carton's link in bio newsletter. Not specific to sports, but those three help keep me up to date in the digital space and provide tons of value.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing those, and we'll make sure to link your newsletter along with the others that you named there, kind of in episode details and whatnot. And so, thanks, Alex, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and knowledge in the space. And you'll be able to find this episode on Spotify, Apple, along with YouTube. And thanks for everyone for joining in, and we'll see you next week.